Candice is back. Well, I say you're back with us, Candice. We never got to speak to you at all. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Technology is against us.
Well, you see, I had an image that you had a windmill on your roof and it stopped turning at that point. So that's why we were cut off. So wind turbines apparently overtaken gas as Britain's most used source of energy. Around about 29–30% of UK's electricity last year was produced this way. It's worth having a reminder, Candice, of when Ed Miliband met with Chris Stark. He's the head of the new Mission Control for Clean Power. Their idea was to promote clean energy and the wind turbines that are being built. In this particular case, it was in Hull. You've never heard two people get more excited about wind and windmills as this. Have a listen.
As we walk the length of this 108-metre wind turbine blade without hesitation, deviation or repetition about clean energy. Chris?
Look at the size of this thing. This monster is going to be in the seas around this country generating clean electricity in the next few months. It is amazing to see the extent of what we're doing in this country.
And what's so exciting about this is it's about energy security and lower bills. It's about tackling the climate crisis, and it's about good jobs for people here in Hull. 1,300 jobs from the manufacture at this plant. I mean, you do see the future being built here, don't you?
You do. I mean, what's not to like, really?
Trisha, who works here, said to me, every blade makes a difference.
Yeah, Trisha didn't say that at all. I thought it was a bit mean, Candice, as well, to get his special advisor to walk behind him playing a drum like that, didn't you? That was a kind of curious request, I think, from a senior politician. But there it is, Hull, the epicentre of all things that rotate. Wind power is the future. And now, apparently, here's the proof.
Yeah. I mean, reading... Ed Miliband has an ideological fervour when it comes to this. And I just don't, and I think most ordinary consumers of energy don't. All we want is reliability and affordability, and that's all we care about. If it was actually true that wind and solar could provide for all of our energy needs without us having huge energy bills, I think people would be on board with it. But we do know that there is that intermittency issue. So when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, we have to rely on gas. And we import a lot of gas, and we pay very high prices for that imported gas. And, you know, I see that in this video, Ed Miliband does address certain issues. Like, for instance, he says that they're going to, these new clean energies are going to create lots of jobs, because we know there's going to be a huge loss of jobs in places like the North Sea or in the manufacturing of cars. And, you know, people are starting to realize that those sort of good, well-paid jobs will be one of the casualties of net zero.
What I don't get, and this will probably sound to those that work in the energy sector, a very naive question. I know you have to pay for the infrastructure and it's very expensive to get all of those windmills up and running, but surely this essentially was free energy. I mean, it came from the wind. So why did our bills not go down by a significant amount if we are powering the country, a third of the country, from wind? What's happened there? It didn't cost a bean for the wind. I mean, you might have paid to build the things, but the energy itself was free.
Yes. Well, no country has managed to solve it. I mean, Denmark, I think, which mainly uses clean energy, still hasn't brought bills down. I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of the stuff is massively subsidised as well. We're still subsidising it through our taxes. And, you know, I think you were speaking earlier with Julia, and you were saying that we're going to be using even more electricity now that electric vehicles are sort of being mandated. 2030. So the demands on the grid are only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
There's no doubt about that, and that's likely to be the big kind of crossroads they kind of hit once the kind of rubber hits the road, as it were, and this is wheeled out, you know, in a sort of almost industrial scale fashion, as we're likely to see. We've heard about charging points. They're going to massively increase those across the country over the next couple of years, but you wonder whether it's still going to hit some kind of bump in the road. We'll watch with interest, as we always seem to say. Let's move to this one, Candice. Robert Jenrick suggesting the Tories could seek to limit immigration to the UK from what he described as alien cultures. Of course, Mr Jenrick stood to be Tory leader, but he's now the Shadow Justice Secretary. He said this morning, we've seen millions of people enter the UK in recent years. Some of them have backward, frankly, medieval attitudes to women. This comes following that row over Labour's handling of the grooming gang scandal. Let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer said yesterday when taking questions from the media on the situation.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics, because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
And you can only call for an inquiry if you're far right, apparently, Candice. I mean, that was just one of the most appalling things in a long list of appalling things I've heard Keir Starmer say. I mean, that was almost in another league.
Everything is far right. It just seems to be the standard shock response to everything, and it shows the prism through which, you know, this Labour government views the world. And I think it's quite an outdated prism. And I think what he's failing to do is to respond to the moment. And we're in a very interesting moment. I feel like a lot of the talk about immigration in the past was about economics, but now what Robert Jenrick is bringing in is the idea of integration. I mean, and certain people with certain beliefs about women in particular, after all this stuff about Rotherham, fully integrate into our society, and we should have placed much greater expectations on them to do so. I mean, I think it, you know, once again, I'm referring what you were saying to Julia, it is crazy where we are just a few days into the new year and we're already having these incredibly intense conversations about things. I think the reason is because we've never had them before.
That's very true, and there is something that's sort of, you know, thank goodness about it all, in that we can now talk about this. But I don't know why there would be such resistance that if you import a group of people from countries where their track record on either human rights and certainly women's rights are non-existent, who have come to the UK, they see young girls, they see women as second-class citizens, full stop, particularly young Western girls, young British Western girls. It's white trash, they're easy targets, they're easy meat, they're all of those horrible words that, you know, I won't even say out loud. That is the perception, you know, and these people have come from areas where that is the perception, that is their reality, that's what they think. And then we're scratching our head. But that's what I wanted to hear Keir Starmer say. I wanted to hear him say, do you know what, as a result of this, I'd like to get a message out to people whose communities were looking after the perpetrators. And I want to say in the strongest possible terms, we know where you are, we're looking for you, we know that this can never happen again, even though the smart money says it's still going on. That's the sort of thing I want to hear a Prime Minister say, not write the whole thing off as almost a right-wing conspiracy, which is precisely how the problem began in the first place.
Well, exactly. But, you know, has Labour, bar a few exceptions, of course, really evolved on this issue, or has that same attitude that enabled all this abuse to carry on, does it still prevail within Labour? And I would say it does. I mean, I think there were a few Labour MPs at the time, like Sarah Champion and Cryer, from those areas who tried to call this out, were actually very straight talking about it. They were completely marginalised by their colleagues. I mean, they were shut down as racist. And I don't think that attitude has gone away. There's still this terrible fear. There's still this terrible blocker. They think the big problems in the world are caused by the far right. And it sounds completely oversimplistic and ridiculous, but that's the paradigm. That's the philosophical paradigm that they operate in.
There it is.